How's everyone doing tonight? It is March 2nd and I'm a little bit late, but that's okay. I'm going to continue doing my monthly book reviews. January was real easy because I had a whole lot of time with a snow break, just had a little bit of relaxation going on throughout the month. February was insane. It has been 90 to nothing all month, but I was able to read 5 books. Starting out, I had A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. This was my first experience reading any Hemingway, and it was it was probably one of the saddest endings I've ever seen. So the intro to the book, it's based on World War One. It's an American ambulance driver in Italy, and it goes through his adventures, telling about how he is engaged with the antics of talking to the English nurse, how he's had a camaraderie with the Italian drivers, but it ends up with him and the English nurse falling in love. And the ending, I can't spoil it, but man, oh man, that was probably the saddest ending to a book I could have even imagined. It was kind of a slow intro for me. Then once it got going, I was like, okay, this is pretty good. But man, once it got to the end and the way that everything wrapped up, it was like, oh, this is going to be a great story. And then you just got to read it for yourself. But Hemingway, he did his thing. The second book is a little bit different. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, if I pronounced that correct. He is a winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics, and you can tell because it has a whole lot of jargon. It kind of reminded me of the Psychology of Money, but with a mixture of Darwin and the Origin of the Species, just the way that he's actually approaching his book. So it's about psychology, and it's talking about thinking both fast and slow, obviously, but he's making the argument that everyone has two systems of dealing with anything in life. Thinking fast is reactionary. You have your instincts, you have what you have been led to know as a fact, but facts can mislead you. So, the ideal behind conserving your body's energy is if you pull up to a stop sign and you're in a conversation, excuse me, a stoplight, but you pull up and all of a sudden it turns green, you don't have to do any double checking, you just know that you're going to go. Green means go. Well, that can get us in trouble whenever we infer things such as how many animals or how many of each animal did Moses put on the ark? Well, whenever I did that experiment, pretty much everyone said two. The only person who knew that was wrong looked at everyone else, and I looked at them. They said two. I said, now, why would you say that? Because you knew it was wrong. Everyone associates the ark and two of each animal, but it was not Moses, it was Noah. It is the ideal that you can have something relatable to the facts, but just a little bit off that gets people twisted up. His second type of thinking, thinking slow, is whenever you have to get more methodical, you have to examine, and what you examine can be swayed by, for example, how much time you've spent away from your mail. He had an example where there's these professors and these judges who were looking at the ratio of convictions. Well, the closer it was to lunch, the happier everyone was. So the conviction rate was better. But the further away it was from males, you start getting a pattern where more and more people were going to have the convictions upheld instead of being receiving a latter sentence. Another example of that would be if you're focused on a gym experiment, you've got people wearing black shirts, people wearing white shirts, and it's talking about how many people or how many times a basketball is passed between each other, and there's people moving around on the court, they're moving the screen. Well, at the end of it, you're asked, what do you think about the gorilla? And no one had understood that there was even a gorilla on the screen because they're laser focused on the objective, which was the people in the black shirts passing the basketball. So there's quite a few examples throughout the book that are really, really interesting on how our minds can be swayed based on our surrounding activities and what our day had consisted of. The third book was a continuation of Mark Twain. I started off with Tom Sawyer, and now I've continued with The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And this book it's as good as the expectation was. It was just so hard for me to read the 1800 stigmas that were embedded throughout, which was also difficult for people in the time. So I appreciated how this book came through Arkansas and how it went all the way down to Louisiana, which I have a whole lot of experience and friends with. And just seeing the culture of the day and the mischief that Huckleberry was able to get in was really, really interesting. I would recommend this book because, as Ernest Hemingway said, Mark Twain was the father of American literature, and I was really happy to get a feel for where a bunch of the modern ideals of writing in America came from. Huckleberry Finn, it's an interesting character because it's just so many caricatures and there's so many exaggerations and hyperbole. But that's how most things on social media are, so seeing it in the 1800s was really a treat. The next book is unlike any of the others. That is The Republic by Plato. Ancient Greece from Huckleberry Finn was quite the switch, but I really enjoyed The Republic. Going through on how Plato and his arguments would create the perfect government, the perfect society, it was really interesting to see that a lot of issues we deal with today in 2026, the ancient Greeks were dealing with thousands of years ago. Now, I thought it was really unique and cool how the Republic is based on people's principles instead of the actual actions. He stated time and time again that the ability for people to govern was corrupted by luxury. People could be bare bones, have just the minimum, and everything would work efficiently, but that's not human reality. So let's start off with a very small, what do you need to survive? Well, you've got to be able to farm, but what do you need to farm? So you got to have someone to create your equipment. Well, then they have to have someone to trade with them, and then it continued and continued and continued all the way into a large metropolitan area, which we see in ancient Athens. It is also very cool to see how athletics, philosophy, the warrior mindset versus artistic mindset was compared, and how Plato makes the argument that you can take it too far either way. You can be too much of a warrior and a jock, which will dumb down your mind and make you have a rage, or you can be too much of an artist, an artistic individual, and it can numb you to the point of not having the spine to stand up for what you believe in. I would recommend The Republic to anyone who loves ancient literature. The beginning and end was quite frankly slower for me, but the middle pages were some of the best reading that I've seen. The last book I read, and it's a little bit of a cheat because I finished it on the morning of the first, but I read The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. This has been on my list for several months once I started getting into historical literature, and The Heart of Darkness was kind of hard for me to read due to the allegories and all of the visualization that is in the book. It's a very short read. It's only about 90 something pages, 96 in this edition, but Joseph Conrad has a very intricate tale that's being told by an individual retelling the story in the book. I quite enjoy his first person retelling. It's just interesting to see how the stigmas and the continuation of 1800 mindsets in Europe and Africa are different from what we have today, but how they're also similar. So it's really quite interesting because this book I can't really put my thumb on, but I enjoyed it nevertheless because of how the ending tied together the story in a way that both honors but leaves room to interpret the actions of our protagonist and the individual he looked up to that was in the heart of darkness, as they say. Well, that's a brief overview of the 5 books I read this month. I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you'll pick it up for yourself. Have a great night. Thank you.